and today's cost makes sense with universal access. You also may have failures, so this is not something that is has success, I mean, by definition. So key drivers and frameworks, regulations, and we discussed policies and regulations at length. Regulations and public money are needed in a specific presentation, and a kind of mixed policy with public money, equity, and debt was presented as possible financing scheme of those projects. Okay, so again, trivial but important to remind: policy is the foundation to attract investments. And to stable policies, I mean, share policies are absolutely necessary. The other point, to empower communities and also increase, again, success, is the something we have anticipated this morning, also discussed, is the link between this technological adoption and behavior. So you have to, always to analyze case by case how the adoption is feasible, and the effectiveness depend on behavioral change, and this is absolutely necessary to minimize failures. So we have underlined behavioral change as a key component of this success. And then another issue that was discussed is the costs and benefits of interconnections and economies of scale. So I put this on the table. I mean, the future of electricity is characterized by flexibility and variability among key factors. So this possibility to interconnect grids, so to create a different type of energy structure compared to the old one, is something that was highly and largely debated. And then the complementarity with other frameworks, pretty interesting, some figures, I mean, some possible indicators I found interesting, I mean, in the biogas value chain case study, is to provide figures about, for example, 7 hectares per bus if you use land as an input, or, for example, a share of your urban waste if you use other type of input for your bio site or bio value chain. Okay, I'm pretty done. Then the nexus energy water stress issue also emerged in the session, which is an African issue, but not only an African issue. Other parts of the world are characterized by this moderator serious water stress, and then Africa presents some serious peaks. Okay, so again, food, energy, and water have, but also other sessions. So I'm not spending words. Very final, and as a conclusion, okay, the energy transition should be always managed and analyzed in connection to inequality, human capital, strategies and policies, and poverty policies. So this to recall the connection between energy and development in a broad framework. I'm done.
Thank you very much. So it sounds like you had a very lively debate. So thank you very much for that report on your parallel session. I would like to ask Ania to come up to speak about the first results or some conclusions on sustainable innovation for the circular economy.
Yes. Good afternoon. So we had a really great session, a very short one, I feel. I feel like we actually only started the discussion, so I have some more questions perhaps to ponder for you than answers. I don't have slides, Sorry, I apologize. You have to just focus on what I'm saying. Basically, we started with ICLEI Africa, talking about how cities in Africa are working together and learning from each other and from other partners. And then we went on to talking to 3 cities, to Cape Town, Tshwane, and Amsterdam, talking about their own hands-on experience with sustainability transitions, with eco-innovation, and also with using sustainable procurement as a particular instrument of bringing this sustainability transition and innovation about. And the sustainable procurement discussion led us to first big question, which is looking at the more individual level of transition, and namely, how do you get to shift the mindsets to get people to care more about long-term benefits and not just necessarily go for short-term profits, and to maybe be more willing to take risks, which, as we know, can be sometimes tricky with public servants because, well, public sector and risk don't go very well together. And some of the ideas that we had in this discussion was, first of all, to really focus on frontrunners and to look at people and not necessarily institutions, because once you find one friendly person inside, no matter how intimidating bureaucracy, they will be also your agent inside, and they will help you push the agenda that they also believe in, the sustainability transition agenda. The second one is about experiments. We talked quite a lot about experiments, about different small-scale projects. We heard about many of them from the cities. Some that really stayed in my mind were especially from Cape Town, about their industrial symbiosis program, about their online platform for businesses to exchange on resources and waste. Very, very interesting ideas. And the third one was also about examples, because it always helps when you can tell that others do it. Then suddenly it doesn't seem so scary. And I think that's also a big role that networks are playing, both regional and international. But from that, we very quickly went up to a global level, and that's something I really like about this kind of discussions about how to make change in cities, because you're always between, changing people's heads and then changing the system. And we heard from Marjolein from Amsterdam. She said people are tired of living labs. No, we have so many living labs, so many experiments in Amsterdam, but then what happens with all these experiments? And people think, okay, where do we finally scale it up? And some of the ideas about what helps in scaling this up, I think, are ambitious goals that are representing political will. And we have seen it from all the cities on different levels. For example, it was we heard about the goal of Netherlands to become zero waste by 2050, and obviously setting this kind of long-term political framework really helps the cities to advance their own activities. The second part is regulation, and we also heard from cities trying to work on sustainable procurement, also, for example, from Cape Town and Tshwane, about how difficult it is to push sustainable procurement when you have a feeling that national regulations are not always on your side. And that's the story, I have to say, I know very well from Europe. And when I heard the councillors saying that, yeah, they need to talk to National Treasury and explain to them that it's actually legal and possible and beneficial, I thought, yes, that's exactly what most cities struggle with when they try to implement sustainable procurement, but luckily we have many advances in this regard. And the third part that I think helps to go from experiments to system change is also to work together as a network, because then it's much easier to build a critical mass, and suddenly you're maybe not anymore one lonely councillor, but you're a big group of councillors calling for action. And we see it over and over again from local governments, like, for example, recently at the COP in Bonn, when we have really a big critical mass of cities pushing for more ambitious political action. And in closing, I just wanted to say that it was very interesting for me to focus on sustainable procurement. I think sometimes it's surprising that this as an instrument does not get featured more in discussions about eco-innovation and building local green economies. However, it also made me think that maybe we should be more attentive to this local level, because eco-innovation and, buying green products and services does not always necessarily mean supporting your local green economy. And I hope that this is something that we also get to discuss in the later parts of this event. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ania. I'm very impressed by the rapporteurs, how quick they have come up with all these conclusions. So I would like to ask Pierre from Technalia to speak about panel 2, Sustainable Innovation for the Circular Economy, so the second part. Please, the floor is yours.
Excuse also, I did not have time to prepare slides as it was very short, only 5 minutes. But coming back on the session, I think it was also a very interesting session, even though at the beginning I had a very dark picture of what was the situation, in this case, of the mining industry in Ghana. And then following, by the end of the session, another black picture drawn on the e-waste sector. Both even very different sectors, both have a very deep tradition in the country. Either, as you mentioned, Malcolm, the e-waste, there is a tradition of passing by elements like cell phones that have been used by a first user to a second user and a third user, which is not the case in most European countries. We directly threw it away and go for a new one. So the mining industry has also this kind of long history of small-scale mining, which is now competing with the big-scale mining, since not only in the recently, but in the past also. And Nathan depicted a very dark picture also of the mining industry, that poor technological level also produces poor income and environmental problems and health issues. So in general, there was a very big challenge doing a transition from this, let's say, artisanal mining towards something more modern. But there is some hope in both sectors, I would say, in the mining and in the e-waste management sector. The presentations showed us that there are either innovation coming from the locals and also from organizations like IWASA, who are trying to bring forward good practices in each of these sectors. And then on the other part, we had another very interesting presentation of Green Cape, the development agency, where we could see how this organization is assisting either industry, civil society, and municipalities in making transition to better practices in issues of renewable energy and also waste management and resource efficiency. So there maybe we could see more, let's say, developed and mature programs being implemented, and therefore at the end of the session, my feeling was getting better, and there is hope for a transition towards circular economy based on this kind of initiatives. So that's about the summary.
Thank you very much, Pierre. So everybody, last but not least, inclusive models for innovative green technology transfer. So Nicolo Barbieri from the University of Ferrara is going to give us his conclusions on this.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I have just one slide. And well, let me say that it's my pleasure to be here, of course, and report to the plenary all the interesting issues that emerged from the session of inclusive models and the green knowledge transfer. I have to admit that was a bit complicated to summarize all the interesting topics that has been covered in this session, as you can see from the Jackson Pollock style slide. And but however, the issue at stake in this session was straightforward, and substantially revolved around the idea that North-South knowledge transfer, as Astrid was pointing out pointing out this morning, is just a part of the story. On the other side stand South-South, among others, South-South, and bottom-up cooperation channels, in which the emphasis lies on the co-creation of knowledge processes and of course mutual feedbacks from different actors. Therein, well, three main building blocks has been extensively recalled: frugal innovation, inclusive business, and knowledge transfer, and how knowledge transfer interact with this macro framework, let's say. Most of the speakers, directly or indirectly, have stressed the role of green knowledge transfer in the sustainability context. This is also particularly relevant when we focus on the nexus thinking, which was the framework of our last symposium in Cyprus, and which tries to analyze, understand the complex synergies between food, water, and energy. Well, a first issue that emerged from the session concerns the relationship between knowledge transfer and the achievement of sustainable development goals. The keywords here are connection and scaling, as you can see. Connection and scaling because, of course, connecting and scaling impactful experiences in low-income countries is pivotal to achieve sustainability. Knowledge transfer, again, also in this context, is key and emerged in different ways and with different shades. And also, it is also important because when we refer to across region and especially across community knowledge transfer. The other point is that of course it has been observed that the heart of sustainable development stand finance and credit accessibility. Again, knowledge transfer here is important because the diffusion of knowledge, the diffusion of practices aims at filling skill needs, which of course improve efficient and effective use of credit with all the socioeconomic benefits that this and externalities that this brings about. Well, the second point is related to frugal innovation. Frugal innovation concerns the development and diffusion of locally driven solution for serving local needs. And this, of course, is particularly important for SDGs with respect to the Nexus within the Nexus framework. Indeed, the challenge that frugal innovation has to deal with is complexity. I didn't include it, but it's complexity. Trust me. And in today's networked economy, of course, through supply chains and value creation networks, frugal innovation will have of course, widespread impact across sectors, but also markets, technological fields, and so on. The final macro area that has been recalled in this session was, of course, the topic of inclusive business models. This inclusive business, just to be brief, try to involve communities at the bottom of the pyramid into value chains as, for example, customers, producers, suppliers. And of course, these models builds on cooperation and collaboration among, of course, the different types of stakeholders. And the discussion it has been observed that we have knowledge sharing and knowledge transfer, of course, are fostered by inclusive models, and this is an endogenous process. Knowledge transfer helps and enables inclusive business growth and inclusive growth in general. While the role of barriers has been extensively recalled, lack of physical infrastructure, some of these barriers, lack of physical infrastructure, access to financial services, a proper incentive structure, etc. And then concluding, saying that of course, and this is particularly relevant from my point of view, it is pivotal to encourage inclusive growth and inclusive model implementation, especially in low-income countries. But of course, policymakers often see entrepreneurship as a panacea for inclusive growth, especially in underdeveloped regions. But we should be reminded that, of course, it may also lead to unanticipated negative outcomes, and I'm referring to social exclusion. And therefore, policies should address both economic and social perspectives to foster these more productive entrepreneurial outcomes, albeit at a more constrained economic pace. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for a great job for here summarizing what was a very long and complex session. So excellent. So I would like to thank not only our rapporteurs here, I would like to thank all the speakers of today for their preparation and the brilliant speeches and inspirations that they have been giving us. I would like to thank our drawing artist, which is, some people might have watched, there's always drawings coming, which we're going to be using for reporting and illustration of what we are doing. So I would like to thank that artist as well. I would like to thank the colleagues for tweeting and sharing all the information. And finally, I would say we had a very good day. I hope to see you all back tomorrow for a great discussion where everybody can also get involved a little bit more in the World Cafe, and we can listen to your opinions and ideas. So we come up with implementable models. So 9 o'clock tomorrow sharp, despite all the great things that are going to take place tonight.